Within Russia today, the purge is spreading. We've seen this spring of arrests, the number of generals who have been arrested by Vladimir Putin's FSB, the intelligence service, over the recent months. In fact, there have been 16 Russian generals arrested since 2022. By comparison, since 2020, there's not been one general in the U.S. military that's been arrested. So what's going on? Why are all these arrests increasing? And what does it mean for the situation inside the Kremlin? Because arrests at this level, they mean there is betrayal at the top. This means that there are networks that are flipping to save themselves. This means that today, fear is replacing competence. And that is replacing any sort of structure or command and control or logistics in the Russian military. Because today, the Russian military is worried about whose door will get knocked on next. My name is Jason Smart, and I'm a special correspondent for the Kiev Post, and I happen to have spent the last 20 years studying Russia and the Putin regime. And inside of Russia today, it does sort of sound a lot like history. It does remind one of the Stalinist period. The fact is, the late night knocks on the door from the intelligence service are something that still happen. And today, that's happening with the Russian military. We see that the FSB is hunting supposed traitors. They're looking for people within their ranks who they think have betrayed them. The thing that's interesting about it is that there's probably not a lot of evidence for it. In fact, there's probably very limited evidence. Instead, what they're doing is they are looking for cases of corruption, but they're not even looking for them. The fact is they already have the cases of corruption. They're simply dusting them off. That is, they have compromising material about the Russian military leadership, but today they're choosing to use it. So why is that? What happened now that wasn't happening before? That the Russian intelligence service knew of things such as generals' corruption, but only recently decided to start executing this. Only recently decided it was time to put them behind bars. And the answer is that things in Russia are much tighter and much more worrisome than what you might possibly think. And that's despite the fact that the Russian press says the same thing as the Western press, that everything fine is in Russia, everything is great, but it couldn't be further from the truth. We see how the lack of oil, the attacks by Ukrainian drones are destroying Russia's critical infrastructure. It is destroying Russia's ability to create fuel. It's impossible for Russia to refine the one resource for which it is known. But that's not just because of Ukrainian drones. Within Russia, there are also organizations like Atesh attacking Russia's ability to wage war or to function as a state. You see, Atesh's function is to attack things such as the relay boxes, to attack the railroads of Russia. Atesh is seeking the violent overthrow of the Putin regime, and their means of achieving that is by destroying the regime's ability to operate. So all this is happening on the backdrop of an FSB that is increasingly arresting Russian generals. This is all happening on the backdrop of a population that's becoming increasingly concerned that Ukrainian drone strikes or attacks by Atesh, they're becoming commonplace. So despite what you read in the news, don't believe it. Things are not all fine in Russia. Things are bad, and they are getting worse. So help me get this news to more people. The truth of what's happening in Ukraine, but also with the truth of what is happening inside of Russia. The fact that within Russia today, the situation is increasingly out of control. The way by which you can help me is very simple. Please like this video, subscribe to this channel, and consider becoming a channel member today. The fact is, once you understand how bad the situation is inside of Russia, it's very clear why we should support Ukraine. Not only is Ukraine the underdog, but Ukraine is winning, and Ukraine will win. The only way it would be possible for Russia to win in Ukraine is if we allow them. Because right now, the Russians do not have the might to win in Ukraine, and they are losing inside of Russia. Inside of Russia, we've seen the arrests. Look at the generals who have been arrested, some of the big names recently. The most well-known, of course, was Deputy Defense Minister Timur Ivanov. He got 13 years in prison. He was the right hand of the former Minister of Defense, Shoigu. What's interesting about Shoigu was he was forced out due to Prigozhin largely. Prigozhin led his rebellion of Wagnerites, and thereafter there was a decision made that he had to go. but he was also the right hand of somebody, which means he was signing the checks for him. He was doing his bidding. So the fact that Timur Ivanov ended up behind bars is interesting. It means that people opposed to Shoigu were taking out on Ivanov what they cannot do to Shoigu himself. Shoigu is a personal friend of Putin's, so he doesn't face prison. But why would they go after Ivanov? Well, let's make an example. It's so that everybody sees that. The FSB is arresting somebody who everyone thought was untouchable. And that is why he's in jail. Look at the personnel chief. Look at the Defense Ministry's Lieutenant General Yuri Kuznetsov. Now, Kuznetsov got arrested for $8 million of bribes. What's interesting is not just the cash and the millions of dollars worth of properties. It's the fact of who he is, what role he played. Personnel chief is important in the Russian military. He decided who got promoted and who didn't, who got stationed on the front and who got to have a nice cushy job in Moscow. Kuznetsov would have definitely engaged in corruption, as the cash and the valuables that they seized would indicate. But what makes it interesting is how much he knew, the ledger he kept that indicated who paid him how much, when, and why, which then opens up everything else. Doesn't surprise us then that Lieutenant General Vadim Shamarin was also arrested, or that Vladimir Verteletsky was also arrested. They were all engaged in abuse of office and state contracts being out to companies that didn't complete the orders. They just pocketed the money. Why were they engaged in this corruption? How does the FSB know about it? Because the FSB collects information on everybody. It collects it so it can have compromising material. See, unlike in the West, where normal countries have law and order, in Russia, the police, when they find out about something, or the intelligence service, oftentimes does not think it's worth arresting you. They won't prosecute you. They instead will blackmail you. And that's how Russia operates. So today, when we're trying to understand what's going on, why is this? It's very simple to understand. It's about blackmail. You see, the FSB is a criminal enterprise. It's nothing more. We call it Russia's intelligence service, but really it just uses the methods of an intelligence service to operate its criminal organization. And the don of that mafia remains Vladimir Putin. So today they're rolling around Moscow. There's less money to be made. Ukrainian drone strikes are taking out the oil industry. That's hurting businesses across the country. Trucking, trains, they all require fuel. And Russia has less of it. And that which it has is very expensive. So everything's more expensive and businesses are hurt. Tax revenue will also fall. All this means is that there are less pockets for the FSB to pick. And Vladimir Putin is very keen to keep his FSB happy. He wants to keep them loyal. But he also knows that the Russian military isn't happy with him. They've lost a lot of soldiers and there's not a lot to show for it. And he keeps sending them off to die. So of course, logically, Putin fears what the military could do. He fears what it might do. So it probably makes a lot of sense that Vladimir Putin today is allowing these purges within the military. He's allowing these arrests. Now, once again, we've discussed this before. If you were in the Russian military and you realize that, yes, you were engaged in corruption, as everybody in the Russian military is engaged in corruption, would it be at all surprising that today you're looking around, seeing people take away in handcuffs, and you realize, I could be next. They probably already know, since they got my former boss, what he knew. He knew I was engaged in corruption. And if they took him away, that means that one day they will come to take me away. But this creates another interesting situation. Because obviously there is betrayal, and they will undoubtedly snitch on each other to avoid going to prison. However, the FSB's greatest interest here is not national security. It's about making money. It's about taking over the rackets that had formerly been controlled by the military. So if that's their objective, it's simply to make money, not to serve the state's interest, not to improve Russia's national security. That means that they're going after the generals that have the most money, not the generals who were not so good at their jobs. They simply want money. So that means that today, the generals who are succeeding are probably the ones that are willing to make a deal. Those who have the most money to spread around. The most corrupted will probably be the ones that get to stay. The ones who are straight, the ones who are more serious, the ones who are less interested in their careers and making money and just more interested in being soldiers, they're the ones who will get taken away the first, because everybody else realizes that they are a problem. They could tell about what everyone else has been doing, and in fact, there's very little on them. There's something, undoubtedly there's something about them, but there's less. So let the FSB go take them down. This is not going to help the Russian military to operate any better. And for that matter, let's be clear, the FSB, it knows very well that the Russian military has shortages, massive shortages of everything you can imagine. Whether it's munitions, whether it's clothing, whether it's food, whether it's oil, the Russian military is left lacking. But do you think that today we can expect that the Russian intelligence service will be doing something to fix that? It's going to find a better way to improve the logistics or to improve the supply chains? It is not. It is just going to replace those companies, those that are facing shortages or dealing with ports that have become choked. It's not going to try to figure out how to solution that. But it is going to replace them with companies owned by people in the FSB, because now they want to make sure that everybody is clear. The Russian military, it's no longer controlled by the Russian military. It's controlled by the FSB, which means the contracts you used to give to your military friends, those are over. Those contracts go into our pockets. So let's think about that. What does that mean? It means that today we have a Russian military that's not as worried about what happens in Ukraine as they are about what's happening back on base. Whether or not the FSB has come to pay them a visit or is chatting with their friends and relatives to learn more. That is their priority. They don't care about what's happening in Ukraine. The suppliers are only worried about not losing their contracts. Today, they're trying to figure out if they can offer bribes to the FSB in place of the military so that their company is not taken out of the equations. But the FSB, it should be looking for spies. It should actually be trying to improve the security of Russia. But it's not. It's worried about shaking down the military. How is a country supposed to function? A country that is in a war is having internal fighting. It is having a civil war. Russians fighting Russians is a top priority for both the FSB as for the Russian military. That is their greatest concern today. And this is all on the backdrop of a country that is routinely being struck by Ukrainian drones. We see the drones that are attacking the oil revenues of Russia. They are attacking Russia's ability to operate, which means that more of the elites will continue to flee, which means we can expect more arrests and less competent managers to get promoted. And all this is happening as the logistics get further degraded throughout the country, not just on the battlefield where they're facing higher losses, but on the backdrop of an entire nation that is watching these high-value targets exposed. An entire nation that has seen that their country simply cannot cope. And that Russia today, it's being lost to infighting. Russia is becoming unstable. And Vladimir Putin, does he realize this? Does he realize that perhaps he should tell his soldiers, focus on the war. You need not worry. I've got your back. No, he doesn't do this. Vladimir Putin would never do that. Because Vladimir Putin only worries about Vladimir Putin. That's the secret to understanding Putin. The secret to understanding most any dictator is the same. It is not about their country. That is always the pretext. It is always about them. So Vladimir Putin, if it means castrating the entire military, but it'll protect his office, he will be sure that they will not seek to overthrow him. He would do it because he doesn't care about the soldiers or the military or really the war as much as he cares about his own security. And likewise, the FSB, the intelligence service, it doesn't really care about national security. It does care about making a buck, about controlling the entire Putin mafia, because it understands that there are less assets, there is scarcity, and now they have to go shake down others to make more money. But also they understand that Vladimir Putin's days are numbered. One day the Putin regime will end, even if it's naturally. And if that happens, they want to be sure that they come out on top. And now they're eliminating their competition. So despite what others say, things are not well in Russia. Things are worse. But right now, in the Kremlin, things are getting chaotic. Thank you for watching. Please like, please subscribe, and consider becoming a channel member today. As always, thank you for supporting Ukraine.
Our hearts beat to the city streets. We began to feel the fire. We rise like tall buildings, as the chemicals they take us higher. The night's young, and it's just begun, as she puts her hand in mine. We wanna chase the night, wanna dance to the light, pull stars from the sky, just two hearts running wild. Never sleep, never stop, as we shout from the top. We're gonna be two hearts running wild. Now the morning is the afternoon, we lay awake in bed. The laughs so loud as the hours pass, we're gonna do it all again. We wanna chase the night, wanna dance to the light, pull the stars from the sky, just two hearts running wild. Never sleep, never stop, as we shout from the top. We're gonna be, we're gonna be two hearts running wild. The moonlight, summer sky, it was the best we ever had. And we'll stay on forever, we'll never have regret.